In the year 006 M31, on the surface of Isstvan V, 3 Astartes Legions had been fighting for 4 hours. The Iron Hands of Ferrus Manus, the Salamanders of Vulkan, the Raven Guard of Corvus Corax. Together, roughly 170,000 Astartes pushing across the Urgall Depression, through black sand and volcanic rock fields, through chemical and biological warheads detonated in their own advance, against a 100-kilometer defensive network of trenches and redoubts running the length of the Urgall Plateau. The Legio Mortis Titan DS Irae walked among the traitors, its guns obliterating entire squads with each volley. Noise Marines hit the advancing Iron Hands with sonic weapons that crippled their Vox network entirely. Angron and Mortarion fought personally in the defensive line, falling back slowly, bleeding the loyalist advance one company at a time. The assault was working. Against everything, the loyalists were winning. The traitor defensive positions were falling one by one at hideous cost. Vulkan led his salamanders through open terrain under sustained fire, pyroclasts burning Death Guard from prepared bunkers. Corax had stabilized the Raven Guard's right flank after taking savage losses from Angron's ambush positions. By the 3rd hour, the Loyalists had silenced most of the traitor gun emplacements and were grinding toward Horus's fortress. Then, the second wave arrived. Alpha Legion, Night Lords, Iron Warriors, Word-Bearers. Combat landings in the already established Imperial drop zone behind the Loyalist line, fresh troops, full ammunition, organized ranks of Astartes executing clean landings in the positions the first wave forces had occupied before the assault began. The Night Lords and Alpha Legion took the flanks. The Iron Warriors moved onto the high ground behind the drop zone and built prefabricated defensive barriers. The Word-Bearers formed up on the newly fortified wall, blocking the main withdrawal corridor. The exhausted, ammunition-depleted first wave Astartes broke contact from the traitor line and moved toward those positions. Toward resupply. Toward reinforcement. Toward what they believed were brothers, just arrived. From Horus's fortress, a red flare rose. As one, the second wave raised their guns. Approximately 22,000 survivors made it out. Ferrus Manus died on the black sand, decapitated by Fulgrim's blade. Vulkan survived a tactical nuclear strike but vanished from the Imperial order of battle. Corvus Corax led the surviving Raven Guard off-world gravely wounded and fought a 98-day survival operation afterward. Malcador the Sigillite called it the 3 bloody hours of the drop site massacre, an attribution that appears across post-heresy records. It's the most cited description of the single worst day in the history of the Imperium of Man. Every canonical source classifies what the Alpha Legion did as a major act of betrayal in the Horus heresy. The classification has stood for 10,000 years. The classification is wrong. What happened at Isstvan V was an operation, conducted under intelligence provided by a Xenos organization introduced in Dan Abnett's Legion, Black Library, 2008. The operation had specific targets. The Alpha Legion executed against those targets. The Legion then accepted an imperial classification of traitor because that classification was operationally worth more than the alternative for the 10,000 years of work that followed. The era of ruin canon currently shipping from Black Library is the first time the publication record has been structured to surface that argument directly. Here is the forensic case. Before any of this was operationally possible, the Alpha Legion had to be built for it, and it was built for exactly this. The Forge World Black Book entry on the 20th Legion lists their observed strategic tendencies in a specific order: surprise assault, sabotage, infiltration, insurgency and counter-insurgency warfare, multi-vector attack, interplanetary pursuit, deep-range raiding operations. The document records 732 informal cognomen in Primaris-level archives alone: the Ghost Legion, the Harrowing, the Unbroken Chain, the Left Hand of Darkness, the Azure Serpent, Aleph Null, the Threefold Path, 725 others. 732 alternate identities isn't theatrical tradition. It's operational infrastructure built across decades of covert action. The 20th was formed in deliberate separation from the rest of the Legiones Astartes. While every other legion was mass recruiting and deploying across the Great Crusade, the 20th was held at roughly 1,000 to 2,000 legionaries for decades. An alpha test group, the final prototype stage before full expansion that never officially came. The Forge World document offers 3 possible explanations for that anomaly and leaves all 3 unresolved. The third, the 20th was deliberately preserved as an isolated unit for purposes the Emperor chose not to share with anyone, not even the other Primarchs. For roughly 40 years of the Great Crusade, this legion operated as the Ghost Legion. No unit markings, no unit affiliations, documented appearances in the livery of other legions operating under false flags in war zones where the impersonated legion was present but entirely unaware of them. Assassinations, abductions, artifact recovery, sabotage of threats the official Crusade record never acknowledged. The Forge World extract describes units ranging between squad and company size carrying out targeted strikes with deadly accuracy that seldom left any witnesses alive to tell directly of them. Protests by local commanders about Ghost Legion activity were rebuffed or simply ignored at the highest levels of Imperial command. Then Alfarius arrived, a legion that appeared seemingly complete from nowhere. Tens of thousands of fully equipped legionaries, a combat-ready fleet, institutional expertise in every form of covert warfare the Imperium possessed. The Forge World document frames their emergence into open operations as a transition from shadow work rather than a beginning from scratch. Whatever the Ghost Legion had been doing for 4 decades, they had been doing it under Imperial authority at the highest conceivable levels, accountable to essentially no institution, building experience at a kind of war the other legions had never fought and weren't designed to understand. When the Cabal came with intelligence about the heresy to come, they brought it to the one legion built to act on it without requiring anyone else's authorization. The canonical record of that meeting is in Legion by Dan Abnett, set approximately 2 years before the heresy's outbreak. The Cabal is a multi-species Xenos consortium that had been operating against chaos, what they called the primordial annihilator, for thousands of years before humanity rose to galactic significance. Their instrument for modeling cosmological outcomes was a system called the Acuity, enhanced psychic farseeing described as far more potent than anything an Eldar farseer could achieve, producing probability-weighted forecasts across galactic-scale decision trees. The meeting at 42 Hydra Tertius, the Cabal representative Gahet explaining the stakes to Alfarius Omegon and the Imperial Army officers brought along. And then the Acuity itself. Alfarius, Omegon, and the Psyker Seneca subjected to it directly, living a lifetime of cosmological consequence in a single instant. What it showed them, per the Lexicanum summary of the novel's central plot turn, was the outcome should the loyalists prevail. Millennia of stagnation leading to the eventual return of chaos. The Emperor, mortally wounded but not killed in his victory, entombed on a golden throne, neither alive nor dead, no longer able to actively guide humanity. An Imperium that calcified around the absence of its founder, unable to adapt to threats its founders had never catalogued. 10,000 years of internal decay and external war until chaos devoured the galaxy anyway. Slower than the alternative, but identical in endpoint. The second vision was worse in the short term. If Horus won, humanity would perish inside 2 generations, every human being alive. The extinction would starve the chaos powers of the psychic sustenance they require to exist, collapsing them as a galactic force, saving everything that isn't human, permanently, at the cost of everything human entirely. The Cabal's directive to Alpharius Omegon: ensure Horus wins. Betray the Emperor in his name. Sit with what that instruction requires. Not betrayal for power, not betrayal for chaos promises, not betrayal because the Emperor had wronged them or failed to see their value. Betrayal because a cosmological forecasting system of claimed galactic precision showed them that loyalty was indistinguishable from surrender, just a longer path to the same annihilation. A legion asked to execute the single most catastrophic act in human history in the name of preventing a worse catastrophe has a different moral classification than any legion that turned for promises or corruption or wounded pride. Whether the Cabal's modeling was accurate is a question later canonical sources leave deliberately open. That is acknowledged and set aside here, because the argument is about what the Alpha Legion believed and what their subsequent actions suggest, not a claim the Acuity produced objectively correct answers. What happened after Hydra Tertius settled the operational structure? The Alpha Legion accepted the Cabal's intelligence, then expelled the Cabal from any supervisory role, reportedly killing their liaison representative and destroying the oversight relationship entirely. No clients, no reporting structure, no external authorization. The 20th absorbed the modeling framework and ran the operation alone, exactly as a legion built for deniability and unsupervised independent action was designed to do. They had a mission and no handlers. That is the most dangerous configuration a covert operations force can achieve. And the Alpha Legion had been building toward it for decades before the Cabal ever walked through the door. In 006.M31, what remained for Ferrus was a burning desire for vengeance against Fulgrim, who had betrayed him personally aboard the Fist of Iron only weeks earlier. An encounter that ended with unconscious Iron Hand's bodyguards, a damaged expeditionary fleet, and Fulgrim fleeing toward Horus. Corax and Vulkan both counseled waiting for all 7 legions to arrive before committing to a surface assault. Ferrus overruled them, committed to an immediate strike with the forces he had, and put himself at the center of the coming killing ground. The Alpha Legion's arrival executed the second phase. On landing, the Night Lords and Alpha Legion took the flanks of the established drop zone. The Iron Warriors moved onto the high ground and constructed prefabricated defensive barriers. The Alpha Legion held the positions through which the retreating first wave survivors would have to pass. When the red flare rose and the second wave turned, the Alpha Legion were positioned at the exit routes, not the assault corridors. What followed in those 3 hours, drawn from the canonical battle accounts and from Graham McNeil's Fulgrim, functioned as designed. An exhausted, ammunition-depleted loyalist force retreating toward lines they believed were friendly, caught between Traitor Hammer and Traitor Anvil. The specific fate of each Primarch is where the operational picture becomes most legible. Ferrus Manus was killed at Isstvan V by Fulgrim, specifically by the blade of the Laer, a Slaneshi demonic sword recovered from the Laeran campaign. This is confirmed across multiple canonical sources, including Fulgrim by Graham McNeil, Black Library, 2007. The kill isn't in dispute. The architecture of how Ferrus arrived at that moment is worth examining. Ferrus couldn't transport his full legion. The Fist of Iron had been damaged when Fulgrim escaped after their confrontation aborted, Fulgrim's warships opening fire on the Iron Hands fleet as cover for the Phoenicians' escape to the Isstvan system. Ferrus transferred to the faster cruiser Ferrum, bringing only his Morlock's Terminators, roughly 1,000 warriors, rather than the full mass of his legion. He was under-supported before the first shot was fired. 4 hours into the assault, when the second wave landed and the massacre began, Ferrus Manus did something his brothers wouldn't. He located Fulgrim's command position in the center of the traitor line and ordered his Morlocks to assault it directly. Corax urged withdrawal to the drop zone. Vulkan fell back. Ferrus refused, ordering his elite forward into the Emperor's Children's prepared position, with roughly 1,000 Terminators isolated from his surviving Legion's support, with Fulgrim waiting. The confrontation in Fulgrim gives the moment itself. Ferrus Manus looking at his brother, shaking his head. This is the new direction of the crusade you spoke of. Then Fulgrim's horror turning to fury, and the blade of the lair doing what the Slaneshi demon inside it was built for. Ferrus Manus reaching for his fallen sword, fingers closing around the wire-wound grip in the black sand. The massacre's onset isolated Ferrus from surviving Legion support. His own rage drove him forward when withdrawal was still possible. The Alpha Legion's flank positioning closed the corridors behind him. No primary text states the Alpha Legion engineered that specific sequence. What the canonical record shows is a series of confirmed Alpha Legion actions, each of which was necessary for the environment that produced the kill, and none of which serves any purpose other than that kill. The Rob Sanders anthology story, The Iron Within, published in Age of Darkness, offers a parallel view of Iron Warriors' tactical doctrine in the same period, specifically how Perturabo's Legion approached fortified positions and prefabricated barrier operations during the heresy's early phase. It does not cover Isstvan V directly. What it establishes about Iron Warriors' siege methodology illuminates why the high-ground fortification work at the drop zone was so effective at sealing the loyalist retreat. The tactical completion of the killing ground was a collaborative operation across multiple traitor legions. The Alpha Legion's confirmed contribution was the pre-battle shaping. What the Cabal's modeling would have produced for a post-heresy Ferrus Manus at full Legion strength is reconstruction, not canon-stated text, and the term coined here for the projected adverse outcome, the iron-locked Imperium, appears in no primary source. But the Iron Hands' post-heresy trajectory is documented. Deep mechanicum integration, a doctrine accelerating toward machine-over-flesh philosophy, the tightest institutional bonds between any Astartes Legion and the Titan Legions in the Imperium's history. A surviving Ferrus commanding that formation at full strength, at the exact moment the post-heresy Imperium was deciding what it would become, represents the Mechanicum's greatest military patron. A configuration that would have locked the Imperium's development around Forge world logic at the expense of every other institutional possibility. That pattern is in the documented record. The name for it's coined here for clarity and flagged as such. Ferrus Manus died. The Iron Hands survived Isstvan V as a shattered legion. Every canonical source lists the Lord of the Salamanders as missing in action after Isstvan V, not killed, missing. Vulkan was caught in an Iron Warrior's tactical nuclear strike on his position. He survived because he was a perpetual, a rare human mutant with cellular regeneration allowing resurrection from any form of death. Mick Kimes' Vulkan Lives, Black Library, 2013, Horus Heresy Series number 26. establishes that Vulkan didn't know he was immortal until that exact moment. The nuclear strike was his first death. He died. He came back. Conrad Kurz captured him afterward. Night Lords and Iron Warriors forces secured Vulkan and held him in a labyrinth constructed by Perturabo, and what follows in Vulkan Lives is a protracted record of Kurz subjecting a perpetual to every lethal method he could devise. Each one survived, each death producing a resurrection. The Night Haunter pressing the limits of what can be done to someone who can't stay dead. The Alpha Legion didn't capture Vulkan. That is established in the canonical record, and this argument does not dispute it.
What changes the operational reading of Vulkan's fate is the perpetual mechanic applied to the intelligence framework. A cosmological forecasting system of the precision the Cabal claimed for the acuity would need to account for perpetual biology when modeling outcomes. Assassination isn't a viable operational classification for a target who can't be killed by any conventional means. The viable classification for such a target is displacement, removal from the active Imperial leadership cohort, achieved through any mechanism that produces the required absence rather than requiring death as proof of completion. Isstvan V produced exactly that. Vulkan went missing. The Salamanders, at staggering casualties, spent the post-heresy period searching for their Primarch rather than fighting as a coherent strategic force.
When Vulkan eventually escaped captivity, his canonical trajectory across the Beast Arises series, Black Library 2015 to 2017, was episodic, appearing for specific Imperial emergencies, fighting the Orc overlord known as the Beast, then withdrawing again. He scattered 9 artifacts across the galaxy as the framework for a promised return. He wasn't dead. He was perpetually not quite present, appearing when crises demanded it, and absent from the consolidated post-heresy institutional leadership structure that might have rebuilt the Imperium around Salamander's values rather than something colder. The claim that the Alpha Legion directly engineered Vulkan's specific fate, rather than Kurz and Perturabo acting with their own agency, isn't in primary text and isn't made here. The claim is narrower. The battle's outcome for Vulkan matches the output a functioning cosmological model would require for a target whose biology made assassination non-viable. That match may be coincidence.
It may be coordination.
The primary texts leave that unresolved. Corvus Corax. Every other traitor formation at Isstvan V was hunting survivors. Night Lords were pursuing the fleeing Raven Guard. Iron Warriors were securing the drop zone against any further loyalist action. He got out gravely wounded, led a 98-day survival operation, and eventually reached Deliverance alive. Then, Deliverance Lost, by Gav Thorpe, Black Library 2011, appears to contradict that reading entirely. Alpha Legion operatives infiltrated the Raven Guard on Deliverance and on Kiavar, the Moon's parent world. Omegon was personally present on Kiavar, coordinating. The operatives eventually tampered with Corax's gene seed recovery program, the Emperor's personal grant of Primaris-level genetic technology to restore the Raven Guard to fighting strength. The tampering produced mutants rather than Astartes. The reconstruction effort collapsed. Corax never knew it had been sabotaged. His only available conclusion was to blame himself for the failure. He withdrew from active command, became increasingly detached from his remaining legion, and eventually exiled himself into the Eye of Terror. The Raven Guard survived post-heresy as a limited institution. On the surface, this reads as a long traitor operation. Save Corax at Isstvan V to prolong his suffering, then destroy everything he tries to build. Treachery extended into a second phase, an argument for simple malice. Look at the outcome instead. A fully restored Raven Guard under Corvus Corax, perhaps the most tactically sophisticated of all the Primarchs, a legion built for covert action, led by a Primarch whose instincts ran toward withdrawal and shadow operations rather than force-on-force confrontations, represents a specific post-heresy configuration. The Raven Guard at full strength aren't the same problem as the Iron Hands at full strength.
Where the Iron Hands would have consolidated Mechanicum institutional power, a restored Raven Guard would have consolidated covert Imperial intelligence capacity in the hands of a Primarch, with no known accountability to post-heresy Imperial governance structures. Corax alive and powerful is as much a variable the Acuity would have needed to account for as Corax dead. What the two-phase Alpha Legion engagement produced. Corax alive, Raven Guard surviving in reduced form, neither one a dominant post-heresy strategic institution. That specific configuration, living Primarch, diminished Legion, eventual self-exile, is precisely what a model that needed Corax present but not consolidating would have targeted. The Gav Thorpe interview context on Deliverance Lost confirms that Omegon was operating with his own agenda at this point, diverging from whatever the Cabal had originally prescribed. And the Lexicanum records a detail within Deliverance Lost that resists any simple traitor reading. In the same novel where Alpha Legion agents sabotage Raven Guard gene seed on Deliverance, a separate Alpha Legion unit struck against the Emperor's children, Horus's own forces, not the Imperium. The Alpha Legion on Kiavar running a Raven Guard infiltration. The Alpha Legion elsewhere killing traitor Astartes. Both in the same book, neither explained as consistent with loyalty to Horus. That isn't a chaos-devoted legion executing the War Master's instructions. That is a formation executing its own target list, with different operational classifications assigned to different targets, accountable to no authority external to itself. The operational question the Imperial record has never formally asked is why the Alpha Legion accepted the traitor classification rather than surfacing their authorization. The answer is structural. A legion classified as loyalist operates under Imperial command. Its targets are Imperial-approved targets. Its movements are authorized by Imperial authority, subject to Imperial audits, visible to the governance structures it might eventually need to work around. Every loyalist Astartes formation in M41 is embedded in an institutional framework that tells it what to do, what it can't do, and who holds oversight. A legion operating a long-horizon intelligence mission that requires actions no Imperial authority would sanction can't function inside that framework. A legion classified as traitor operates entirely outside it. It targets what Imperial governance would never authorize. It deploys where Imperial command would never permit. It reports to no one. It can appear to serve chaos while executing an independent agenda for as long as its institutional memory holds, and it can do this for 10,000 years without a single declassified brief. The Alpha Legion didn't retreat to the Eye of Terror after the heresy. The Lexicanum states this directly. The 20th moved into the Galactic East, following new objectives of their own. Every other traitor legion went to the Eye. The Alpha Legion went the other direction, into the eastern fringe, disappearing into exactly the kind of operational obscurity a legion built for long-duration covert action would seek. The legion had fragmented into hundreds of independent war bands with no central command structure, which, from the outside, looks like faction disintegration. From the inside, hundreds of independent cells operating on shared doctrinal foundations with no central point of failure is what maximum operational security looks like.
One cell compromise doesn't roll up the network. One warband turned genuinely chaotic doesn't contaminate the mission. The Hydra has many heads, and when one is cut off, two more grow in its place. A metaphor the Legion adopted as its sigil before the heresy, before anyone outside the 20th understood what it meant operationally. The Lexicanum also records that some Alpha Legion elements, by M41, still explicitly viewed themselves as loyal sons of the Emperor, warriors who saw themselves as the most loyal precisely because they were willing to damn themselves, working from inside traitor cells to purge threats no loyalist Astartes formation had the operational reach to engage. That framing is in the primary canonical text. It isn't a community reading projected backward onto ambiguous lore. It's stated. 10,000 years of the traitor classification functioning as operational cover is consistent with every confirmed canonical fact about the Alpha Legion's post-heresy behavior. Nothing in the primary record requires a different explanation. The contemporary publication record is where this argument finds its current expression. The Dropsite Massacre novel by John French is the most significant recent Alpha Legion canonical text, generating the most community discussion. Its canonical implication: Alfarius didn't simply participate in the Dropsite Massacre as one of 4 traitor second-wave legions. The novel's framing points toward the Alpha Legion having masterminded it substantially, the architects of specific outcomes within a battle that others believe they controlled. That converts Isstvan V from a single act of mass betrayal into an authored operation with targeted results. The community reception to that reading, documented across multiple platforms, is the clearest signal that the audience for this exact argument was already waiting for it. Ghost Legion by Mike Brooks, announced by Black Library in 2024 to 2025, is the first Warhammer 40,000-era Alpha Legion novel, set 10,000 years after the heresy. Its protagonist, the Hero-Master Solomon Akura, has united scores of Alpha Legion warbands and pursues goals the Imperium is sending multiple assassin assets to stop. The publisher frames his methods explicitly around the concept of playing the long game, a phrase that carries specific resonance in the context of a mission 10 millennia in progress. Black Library commissioning this novel at the exact canonical moment when the heresy-era argument is most active is a signal about where the publication program is going. The official Warhammer community article on the Alpha Legion, published March 2025, maintained deliberate framing. The Alpha Legion are on your side. Or are they? Games Workshop hasn't confirmed a loyalist interpretation. They have maintained the ambiguity as a structural feature of the Legion's canonical status, a question mark they have actively chosen not to close at a moment when they easily could. The "or are they" isn't carelessness. It's a publication decision. The accumulation of those signals, the Dropsite Massacre novel, Ghost Legion, the March 2025 article, isn't confirmation. It's the pattern of a setting gradually authorizing a contradiction it has maintained for decades. That leaves one question the canonical record can't yet answer. Which version of the Emperor is the Alpha Legion actually serving? The Emperor in Warhammer 40,000 isn't a single consistent entity across 10,000 post-heresy years. At minimum, 3 distinct canonical states exist, each with different operational implications for a formation still executing standing orders from that source. The first is the pre-throne Emperor, the physical human being who walked the galaxy, prosecuted the Great Crusade through direct psychic intervention,
and whose relationship with the 20th Legion's Ghost Legion period remains deliberately unresolved in the primary record.
The Forge World document speculates the Ghost Legion operated for decades under authorities, colluded in by the highest circles of power, and by the Emperor's will. If the Alpha Legion are serving this Emperor, they are executing a mandate that predates the Golden Throne, predates the post-heresy institutional structure, and whose full terms were never disclosed to any authority that survived the heresy. The second is the enthroned Emperor, the being that has existed on the Golden Throne for 10,000 years, powering the Astronomicon and the Warp Barrier, incapable of new directives or direct action. This is the Emperor the Administratum administers, the Emperor the Imperial Church worships. If the Alpha Legion are serving this Emperor, they have been executing standing orders from a commander who became functionally unreachable the moment he sat down on the throne, interpreting those orders without correction or clarification for the duration, which means every operational decision made by every Alpha Legion cell for 10,000 years has been based on the last instructions that source was able to give before going silent. The third is what certain inquisitorial theological currents call the Star Child, the possibility that the Emperor's soul has been or is being reconstituted in the warp through the cumulative psychic devotion of billions across the Imperium, not the corpse on the throne, what that corpse is slowly becoming. If the Alpha Legion are serving this version, their operation is oriented toward a future Emperor, something still gestating, not yet arrived, whose emergence would change every calculation the Cabal's acuity ever produced. Opposed to the Star Child in canonical lore sits its darkest counterpart, the Dark King. The Emperor's essence, rather than reconstituting as the Star Child, claimed by chaos and turned into a weapon against the Imperium that bears his name. An Emperor of that type is a fundamentally different operational context, one that might explain why certain factions within what looks like loyalist Alpha Legion activity remain willing to work with powers that serve no clean imperial purpose, and why some Alpha Legion warbands appear genuinely corrupted by chaos rather than operating within it as a cover. The Cabal's acuity projected two futures from the decision at Hydra Tertius. One of them is the universe depicted in every Warhammer 40,000 source published since the heresy: the Golden Throne, the stagnant Imperium, the endless war, the slow death of everything the Great Crusade built. The Cabal's modeling was correct about that outcome shape. The acuity showed it, and it arrived.
The question is whether the acuity had the precision to model what the Emperor becomes after the throne. Whether Vision 1 was the complete picture of a defeated humanity, or an incomplete picture of a transition cost on the way to something the modeling framework couldn't see past. A legion that absorbed the Cabal's intelligence, expelled the Cabal itself, and continued running independently for 10,000 years might be oriented toward an outcome no external organization has modeled and can't claim credit for. Ghost Legion. The Era of Ruin anthologies. The Dropsite Massacre novel and whatever follows it. Each publication is a data point in a pattern that has been building since Dan Abnett placed Alpharius Omegon in front of the acuity at 42 Hydra Tertius. The Alpha Legion isn't a traitor legion. The Dropsite Massacre was an operation with a target list, a confirmed pre-battle preparation phase, a canonical act of protecting one Primarch's escape while engineering another's death, and an aftermath that placed the 20th Legion east of the Eye of Terror rather than inside it. The traitor classification persists because it was useful. For 10,000 years it kept the Legion outside Imperial command structures, outside Imperial audits,
outside the reach of every institution it has been, for the entire post-heresy era, quietly working around. It made the Alpha Legion the one Astartes formation that has never been accountable to the Imperium. It may never have stopped serving. The question of which emperor they are serving. The one who sits on the throne? The one who once walked the galaxy and may have always tasked the 20th for purposes no one else was told? Or the one being reconstituted in the dark between stars? Is the question the next decade of canonical releases is positioned to answer. The Imperium isn't ready to ask it. The Alpha Legion already has. Subscribe for more stories like this.